Oh, what's up everybody? Coach Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Overwatch video. And in this video, we're going to be breaking down these 7 abilities that you use incorrectly. You see, there are many abilities that are being used incorrectly again and again. And if there's an ability you're using incorrectly, it could be the reason that you are unable to climb, because as you know, you go through many uses of that ability over the course of any given game. And it's important that every single use gets the maximum amount of value. So without further ado, we're going to break it all down. But go to the GameLeap website in the links down below for high quality advanced Overwatch guides you won't find anywhere else. Right now, there is not a lot of content out there, especially for those of you who main some of the niche characters, but we have high quality in-depth guides over any character on the GameLeap website, so go check it out in the links down below. But without further ado, let's jump into the video. Then moving on to the 7th ability that you are using incorrectly. And this is one that a lot of people just like to spam, but you gotta be thinking a little bit more critically about what this ability needs to be used for, and it's McCree's Roll. Now, yes, McCree's Roll reloads you, and that is a pretty decent use out of the ability in some situations, but many times people just spam their roll when it's available, when reloading doesn't really take that long, and they don't need the increase in firepower, and they don't have it when they need to get out of the LOS of the enemy or dodge an enemy attack. You gotta understand that McCree Roll has 2 primary uses. 1, to increase your overall DPS and longevity of your damage, and 2, to reposition you as a form of mobility. A lot of times McCrees will die because they're out of position, and many McCrees will swing out into the LOS of the enemy using that McCree Roll to get more damage across. Now, yes, it can actually be something that gets you a ton of kills. It potentially could let you get a kill that you wouldn't have normally gotten, but it's very important that you understand that there is a great amount of risk involved when you're just wasting McCree Roll, especially if you're using it aggressively in that way when there's enemies that can punish you. Think about a character like Tracer. Tracer is really meta right now along with McCree, and that matchup is going to be a matchup you see in many of your games. But Tracer is going to have a much harder time killing a McCree who has his role versus one who doesn't, because you got to think about it. Not only does that McCree get a way to dodge damage temporarily, but he gets repositioned back to his team or out of LOS. He gets to distance himself from the Tracer, making her exhaust more resources, and most importantly, he's going to be more lethal because he can fire 12 shots without stopping. Many competent Doomfist Tracers, Genjis, will wait for you to waste your roll, and then they'll go on top of you very easily with you being able to do very little about it. Now we go to the next ability that you are using incorrectly, and it's actually Zarya Bubbles. Now, Zarya Bubbles pretty easy to use when you have a Reinhardt, right? The Reinhardt goes in, you bubble him, you go in, you take his place, you bubble yourself, you back up as it fades, and you get that cycle of Zarya Bubble. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Zarya Bubble for playing it with an untraditional tank. Whether you got a freaking Diva, a Wrecking Ball, a Roadhog, whatever the case may be, you got to understand how to use Zarya Bubbles in a way that is actually going to allow you to get impact rather than trying to play it in the same way that you always do when you have a Reinhardt. The first and most important thing that you need to be doing with Zarya Bubbles is just trying to get charged. It's pretty simple, but if you can build up energy early, you're going to not only generate ult charge much quicker, but you're actually going to be a threat on the battlefield. So whatever you have to do to generate that ult charge, that should be your primary objective, not necessarily enabling your tank to go aggressively take space. That will not be your primary objective, especially if you have a character like Roadhog, who is going to be doing his own thing, not necessarily tanking damage. And unless you have a very clear form of communication between you and that Roadhog, he's never going to get you the charge that you want unless he's under attack. Now, after you have a certain amount of charge, once you get past that 60 charge threshold, you typically want to be using your self bubble to generate ult charge and playing around natural cover when you don't have your bubble, and then using your team bubble to protect your allies, bail them out of hooks, clear them from anti-nades, just protect them when they're in a mid-fight. That is going to be a way that you're going to get a lot of mid-fight value out of your bubbles while generating a little bit of charge as well. Now moving on to the next character ability that we got to talk about, and we mentioned her before, but we got to bring her back up, and it's Tracer and her recall. Now, players, especially players that are learning Tracer, are still messing up with Tracer's recall. They're recalling not back to safety. They're recalling right on top of where the enemy is. They're recalling into their own pulse bombs, and it's just really not going great for them. But let me help you kind of learn some of the ins and outs of recall so that you can get more overall value out of recall. Now, the first thing that you need to understand is that recall is going to bring you back 3 seconds. Now, this is going to be something something that you're gonna have to feel. It's not gonna be something that you're just gonna say, oh, 3 seconds, I know perfectly what that is. That's just not gonna work at all. But there are many things that you need to be thinking about before you recall and how your recall is gonna go. The most important thing is where you're gonna end up post recall and what is the game plan after you pop out of recall. Remember, your ammo is gonna be completely filled up, and on top of that, you're typically gonna have at least one blink to work with. Now, in the time before you recall and in that 1.25 second rewind time, you need to be thinking about what you're gonna be doing post recall immediately so that you can effectively do it without thinking. Like, let's say you're fighting a Zen, right? And that Zen is at 1 HP. The second you're done with that recall, you need to instantly shoot the Zen with your full ammo and then use your blink to start to retreat and get away. A lot of times you do not have time to hesitate. You do not have time to think post recall. You need to act immediately. And if you ever look at high level tracers, they do this a lot. Also, you got to pay a lot of attention to how you're blinking around a target. If you blink in a straight line at a target, you recall, you're going to get yourself completely out of the fight, not in a position to potentially finish off a weakened target. So that's something that you need to think about. And if you're swarming around a target in a circle, like up against a Zen, if you recall, you're probably going to end up around that target still. So that's something else you might need to think about. So it might not be the out that you need when maybe there's like 3 people, you're circling around a Zen, there's a McCree, there's a Roadhog there. The second you get done with that recall, you got to think that many people are going to be looking at you. So you might want to blink the second you get out of recall so that you don't get hit by a hook or a stun or whatever the case may be. Now moving on to the next ability on the list, and this is not really an ability, but I have to include it because this is something that a lot of people are messing up, and it's Moira's primary fire or her healing. This is something that a lot of people don't really understand. So let me break down the numbers for you so that you can get the maximum amount of value out of this really powerful hero, especially in low rank play. Now, Moira is really strong. Everyone knows that because of her mobility, especially at low ranks when you don't have a lot of peel, but a lot of low rank players don't know how to manage her heal resource. Here's what you need to understand. Her primary fire, her primary heal, just a single touch of it will heal 35 over 2 seconds without any additional heal. Just a tap will heal 35 over 2 seconds. Now, on top of that, the healing does 70 per second. So you tap it for 1 single second, you're going to hit her with that 70 per second, and then you're going to get 35 over 2 seconds. Now, this is enough healing to basically get any low squishy target up to a reasonable level to where you don't have to focus them in that time frame. For example, in a crazy fight, you see a squishy that needs heals, just tap them for a single second before moving on to another target. You can always go back to that target later after the 2 seconds is up or sometime in the future, but you do not need to be dumping your entire half mag of heals into a freaking squishy. That's just a complete waste of resources, and it's one of the biggest reasons why Moiras a lot of the time do not have enough heals for prolonged fights, when if you balance this healing tactic, you are almost never going to run out of heals, and when you finally do, you're going to break that threshold to get your ultimate, use your ultimate, get a full charge of heals again after the fact, and the cycle just continues. Now moving on to the next ability that a lot of people are messing up, and it's Maze Wall. Now, Maze Wall is extremely powerful when used correctly, but many times it gets no value. There are ways to use it proactively, like walling off a target, getting behind a target, you're pushing on attack, you wall a target off from retreat and you push them. That can be really strong, but that's not the mistake that I'm really talking about. I'm talking about people using walls at chokes that don't really block off what they need to block off for their team to capitalize on it. You got to think about what characters can jump over the wall and what characters can't, and you want to try to isolate a single target if possible, but it has to be a target that cannot cross over the wall. If a diva walks into the choke, walks past the choke, you cannot wall her off because she can fly right over and it's most likely a bait. Also, don't forget the many other uses for Mei Wall, like blocking off Zen Transcendence healing, raising your team up and out of a Graviton, reactively blocking a Roadhog hook. There is so many different things that a Mei Wall can really just shut down, but you got to be really quick with it, and you got to be always thinking about when you can use your Mei Wall to stop any given ultimate or ability on the fly. Now we're going to the next ability that you're using incorrectly that is really preventing you from getting these amazing shatters throughout the course of the game, and it's Fire Strike. Many Reinhardts are not using Fire Strike correctly, and the reason I say that is if you're not using Fire Strike correctly, you're not going to get a lot of ult charge. Now, when you're in the Rein v Rein mirror, it's a little bit easier because you can aim at that center mass of that Rein. A lot of enemies are going to be stacking behind that Rein, and you can easily just hit that Rein right center mass, and you're typically going to get multiple multiple targets with your fire strike. However, when you're up against some compositions that don't necessarily have a front line, it can be pretty difficult to get guaranteed value out of your fire strike. Now, most importantly, you want to be targeting characters that aren't highly mobile. That should be pretty obvious. But if you want to give them less time to dodge, you really want to slide it along natural cover. Make sure that they don't see it coming. They don't see the windup. They don't see the setup until it's already flying along the wall. Now, another thing that's actually extremely underrated with fire strike is freaking practicing it. I know, crazy concept, but you actually can go into a training room. There are many ones where they have targets that fly around and you get unlimited fire strikes. Practice the timing of fire strike. Moving targets, in the air targets. You see high level players do it all the time where they hit a giant amount of fire strikes on targets that are not easy to hit, and it really just comes down to practice, trial and error. And yeah, you could do this in game and it's going to take a long time, but if you just put a little bit of practice into practicing fire strike outside of game in a training setting, you're going to get so much better at fire strike. You're going to get a lot more consistent, and you're just not going to keep whiffing them over and over again into a wall. Now we're going to the last ability, the most important ability that players are misusing, and it's speed boost. I've talked about this before, and I'm still going to talk about it because it's such a damn important ability, and many players are still using it incorrectly. You have to use speed boost to move into better positions. You cannot use speed boost to speed boost at a spawn only to get to choke and stand around. You got to understand that a movement speed buff is almost like a damage increase buff and a damage reduction buff combined into one, because you're going to be in open space less time, so you're going to take less damage, and you're going to be able to push people quicker, so they're going to take more damage, and you're going to have more opportunities to get kills all smacked into one. So the important thing is to not just overly waste this really powerful ability by just spamming heals instead, which you should not be doing hardly at all in Lucio. Half heals at the very most unless you have no other option, and speed boost through choke, speed boost to actual positions. Basically, think about it this way. If there's some sort of objective, then speed boost to get there quicker. If there is some area that you want to cross that has enemy potentially contesting that area, speed boost to get there quicker. If you're moving from somewhere to somewhere else that is not under threat, that has no objective, do not speed boost. It's pretty simple, but it's extremely, extremely important. Another thing you could do a lot of the time when you're playing with your team, you're waiting for an opportunity. If the enemy is weak, they get anti-naded, one of them gets out of position, whatever the case may be, you see that as an opportunity to capitalize with your speed boost. That person's out of position, you say, let's rush, let's rush, let's rush. You just spam the comms, you speed boost in, and you can go punish that target. While in most cases that person would get away scot-free, a weakness can be easily capitalized with proper timing on this ability. But I hope you learned something in this video. Definitely let me know what abilities you see people at your rank use incorrectly, and one that really, really makes you mad. But go to the GameLeap website in the links down below for high quality advanced guides, tips and tricks, map guides, character courses. We got it all on the GameLeap website, so do yourself a favor, go check it out in the links down below. But thank you so much for coming by. That's all I got for you today. I'm Coach Mills. I love your faces. I'm going to bed. See you next time.